right, in the previous two videos, we talked about while loops and we looked at some simple examples on printing different numbers or different statements or different strings using a while loop and repeating something over and over again depending on how you set your condition. In this example, we are going to look at something slightly different, but we are going to use a loop to do that. All right, let's say I have this sequence with a bunch of numbers. Again, the sequence could be anything. It could be a list, it could be a tuple, it could be a string. And I'm going to store a bunch of numbers here. Okay. I want you to think about a way to print all of these values in the shell for me. Okay, so the simplest solution that could come to your mind is whenever you're trying to access something from a sequence, you basically need the name of that sequence and then the index number for the value that you want to access. So if I say print sequence index number 0, is going to print 3 for me. If I have, let me copy and paste this one. If I have sequence 1, it's going to print 7 for me. So if I run this one, it's going to print 3 and 7. And if you continue this one, if I continue this one, just put more. So this is index number 2, index number 3, index number 4, and then index number 5. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have the 6th one. So I'm going to change that. It should give us all of the values in this list. So as you see, 3 all the way to the last value 2 that we have in our sequence. Okay? So, but let's say you have a sequence that is huge. You have like millions of items in it. Do you want to go ahead and say print sequence 0 and then all the way to the end of it? No, that doesn't make any sense. That makes it very, very difficult to do it. But again, there should be easier way because as you see, something is, we have a pattern here. We have a pattern. So sequence, same. Like in all of them, we have the sequence. In all of them, we are printing. And then the only thing that is changing is the number that you have for your index number. That is the only thing that is changing. And similar to the previous example, we know how to create those numbers. We know how to set up a loop that creates a number from 0 to 6. So if I'm given this problem and I know I can solve it this way, okay, I'm going to say, okay, that's cool. I know that. And the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on generating numbers from 0 to 6. If I'm able to do that, I just replace that number with that variable that generates those numbers for me. So let's try it. I'm going to comment the section for a second. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start from 0. That's my start value. So your initial value is 0. So I'm going to say num, or I'm going to call it idx from 0. And then you're going to say while. And you're going to check your index number and to see if it's less than 6. Should we say less or equal to 6 or less than 6? Think about it. Put the right one. But for now, I'm going to put idx less than 6. And then I'm going to say print sequence bracket this index number, whatever it is, depending on what iteration you're on, you're going to put that. So the first one is going to be 0. In the next iteration, we want it to be 1, and then 2, and then 3. So that means we need to have a step 4 that updates that index number. So index number needs to be incremented, needs to be increasing in each iteration. So you start from 0. You want to go all the way to 6. In this case, not including 6. Which you want to include. So I'm going to add this equal sign. Hopefully you already put that in. And then you're going to print sequence index, which in the first iteration is going to be 0, which is this one. And then you add 1 to it, it becomes 1. 1 is still less than 6, so you print sequence 1, which is this statement. You add 1 to it, it becomes 2. 2 is still less than 6. You print this statement, so this line is going to be created, and then you add 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Until you get to 6, you do sequence 6, you add 1 to the index number, it becomes 7, and 7 is not less than 6 anymore, and that's the stop for this while loop. So I'm going to get rid of that part, and I'm going to run it. So here you go, exact same output as before. And as you saw, I was trying to look for a pattern. If I give you a problem like this and I want you to print all of those items, you just simply need to think about, okay, how can I do it like the easiest way, for instance, like sequence index number 0, sequence index number 1, and then see if there's a pattern in there. And then if we can translate that pattern into something else, such as a loop in this case. So now I can give you different types of questions. Like for instance, I want you to only print the values in the sequence that are odd or even or divisible by 3 or divisible by 2. And then you can simply need to put different conditions before you print it. If it meets the conditions for that problem, then you print it. If not, you skip it. So for example, go ahead and only print the values that are divisible by 3, right? So very simple. So I'm going to add a condition here before my print, before I print the value once. And I'm going to say if, okay, in this case, should I say if IDX is divisible by 3 or something else? Think about it, pause the video, see what condition you should put here, and then unpause the video and watch the rest. Okay, if you put IDX divisible by 3, you're looking for what index number that is divisible by 3. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3 that is divisible by 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you're going to get 0, 3, and 6 index numbers. So you're going to get values 3, 7, and 2, right? So let's go ahead and run it. 3, 7, and 2. But that is not what the problem wanted you to do. It wanted you to print only the values that are divisible by 3. That means 3, 3, and 6. So these are the value wanted. Those values are the items that you have that you need to get from that sequence. So you need to check the item itself. So sequence index is your item. And if that item, if that number is divisible by 3, then you want to print it. So now if you run it, you're going to get 3, 3, and 6. So always think about what you are doing, what that problem wants you to do, and based on that, set your conditions and solve that problem. You can always do it step by step. If you started with index and it doesn't make any sense, think about it. Think about what you put here and why it doesn't work. And then make your way out and then create something that works for your problem. Another example, like right here, let's say you want to print numbers that are divisible by 3 and 2, right? So you're going to have two conditions here. I'm going to put an and here, and I'm going to say, very similar to this one, sequence now divisible by 2. So if the number is divisible by both 3 and 2, you want to print it, right? So in this case, we're only going to get 6 because 6 is the only number that is divisible in this list that we have. That is divisible by both 3 and 4. If we change this one to OR, then we are going to get 3, 3, 6, and 2. In this case, we are saying if a number is divisible by 3 or that number is divisible by 2, then print it. So either one is fine. So it's including more numbers into the sublist that you're creating. So again, it all goes back to the problem that you have, but always start with the big picture and then narrow it down to that exact problem that you want to you're trying to solve, okay? So the whole point about having a sequence and going through, you need to access your index numbers. And that is what we are doing. So we are starting from the initial index number, which is 0. You start from 0 and you go all the way to the end of the value that you have, okay? So one last thing that I want to add to here is, let's say the size of this list changes. If the size of this list changes, then you need to come and change this end value. Is there a better way that we can take care of this in which we don't have to worry about that end value? Yes, there is. There is a function that we know that gives you the size of that sequence. And you can use that function to determine what number should be here. That way you don't need to worry about that if that list or that sequence changes over time or changes the size, because you have something here that is dynamic. It changes based on the information it reads. And that function is len. So if you say, what is the len of sequence, it gives you that exact size. So if it's 5, it's going to put insert 5 here. So you start from 0, you go all the way to 5. So that means index number is 0, index number 1, index number 2, index number 3, index number 4, not including 5, because we are saying less than the len of that sequence. So if you do that, let me get rid of this one so we get all of the numbers again. It's going to go through all of the values. If you add numbers to this one, it's dynamic. It's going to go through the entire thing because now it's reading the length of that sequence. And this sequence could be type list as well. So type tuple as well, or type string. So I'm going to go through and create a string here and say hello world. It's going to go through all of those items and print them for you. So that sequence again could be any type, because all of those sequences have index numbers. All of those sequences have their length, and again access different elements, different items in those sequences using index number. You just need to go through them, generate all of the index numbers, and access the item through the index numbers. Just need the name of that sequence and then use the index number to access the item. For some people, it makes more sense to create extra variable here and say, okay, what is my item? They want to distinguish between the item and the index number, and then they create its separate variable to do that. So they store that whatever that item is for that index number into this variable item, so they know, okay, this is my index number, this is my item, I can distinguish them. And then they print the item. Or if they want to print both, so print both index and the item. So at index number 0, you have H, index number 1, you have E, index number 2, you have 1. And these are good ways for troubleshooting. So if you want to put more information in your print to see what you are getting, to understand exactly how the different iterations are working, what values you're getting, then it simply gives you what you want. You can always play with your step here. If you want to get every other character or every other item in it, you can change your step. You can change your step to 2 or 3, basically do the jump. So the start value 0 is basically jumping every 3 or every 2, depending on what you put here, okay? So that all goes back to what problem you're given and then how you want to solve it, what type of solution you want to come up with. But always start from the general form, try to get the big picture and then narrow it down to that specific problem that you have in hand. Always look for patterns and then create a loop that follows that patterns and creates that pattern for you.